Warning: the following film contains scenes that some viewers may find disturbing. Blah 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 blah. Nero, the infamous Roman emperor, ruled with fire. Literally and figuratively. Ascending to power at just 17, he was described by some as a generous ruler during the first 5 years of his reign. However, he quickly shed any pretense of morality soon after. First and foremost, he wasn't much of a family man. His mother, Agrippina, was a little bit too controlling for his liking. So he came up with a cunning plan to make his life a little bit easier. Telling her that he was treating her to a trip away, like some kind of Roman-era cruise ship holiday, he packed her off onto a galley that he'd had specially built for the occasion. Oh, what a nice, loving boy. Yeah, but this was no ordinary ship. You see, the vessel was booby-trapped and designed to collapse like a pack of cards and sink with the simple removal of a couple of bolts. And by all accounts, his plan went swimmingly well. The ship did sink, with most of the passengers drowning, except for the very person the scheme was actually intended for, Nero's mum. Somehow she'd managed to swim to shore and escape. Discovering that his conniving plan had failed, Nero dropped the "oh, let's make it look like an accident" ploy and decided to go down a more pragmatic route. He hired an assassin to get rid of her. But it wasn't just his mother that he took aim at. When his wife Octavia got on his nerves, he had her exiled, and then not long after, executed, which conveniently freed him up to marry his mistress. Every cloud and all that, you know. But his brutality didn't stop there. Nero is most infamous for allegedly playing music, some say on a lyre, while Rome burned in a devastating fire that destroyed much of the city. Of course, being all high and mighty and never taking responsibility for things going wrong in the city, he blamed, wait for it, Christians, unleashing a horrific wave of brutal persecution. Crucifixions, human torches, and arena deaths soon followed. Nero was a man of art and excess, but also of cruelty, paranoia, and bloodshed, personified by his penchant for watching victims being boiled alive in oil or water. In the end, as rebellion rose and his power crumbled, he took his own life. Savage to the core, Nero ruled like a mad god and fell like a doomed star. But in ancient Rome, he was neither the first nor the last. Tiberius, Rome's second emperor, ruled with a shadow darker than his predecessor Augustus could have imagined. At first he seemed like a competent ruler, disciplined, strategic, but as the years dragged on, his mask began to slip down, as did his morals. He withdrew from Rome to the cliffs of Capri, where his villa Jovis became a palace of perversion and paranoia. It's claimed that he indulged in the most grotesque perversions and had lots of people killed there. Whilst back in Rome, his right-hand man, Sejanus, carried out purges, eliminating rivals with cold precision. Some say on Tiberius's orders, and others say he didn't care enough to stop it. Often Tiberius's savage behavior was bizarre and inexplicable. Once, when on a remote shore, Tiberius went along for a stroll on a beach, when suddenly he got startled by a fisherman who tapped him on the shoulder. He wanted to offer him a fish, a mullet, but Tiberius didn't take it too kindly. So, not exactly being happy about being accosted by a smelly commoner with a wet fish, he ordered his guards to punish him by roughly scrubbing his face with the mullet. The fisherman not being the smartest tool in the box, then commented that he was glad that he hadn't offered the emperor a large crab. Yeah, not the smartest thing to say, is it? And so, slightly annoyed, Tiberius decided to do what any good Roman emperor was supposed to do in this situation: act like a depraved, self-absorbed narcissist, and had the man's face viciously torn to shreds with the claws of a crab. Now that's what I call an extreme facial scrub. By the end of his reign, fear ruled more than law. The Senate tiptoed, the people whispered. And Tiberius, he died in mysterious circumstances at the ripe old age of 77. Some say that it had something to do with his great-nephew and successor, Caligula. What goes round comes round, eh? Caligula. Oh, crikey. Now this fellow was an absolute head case. Yep, aptly named Rome's Mad Emperor, he ruled with a mix of depravity and brutality that even shocked the blood-soaked Roman Empire. Which says everything, really, doesn't it? Ascending the throne in 37 AD, he was first hailed as a saviour, until his descent into madness turned him into an out-and-out tyrant. He declared himself a living god, ordered statues of himself placed in temples, and forced senators to grovel at his feet. Oh yeah, narcissism came easy to this fella. And such was his bloodlust, he would turn executions into, entertainment. On one particular occasion, a bored crowd at the circus actually booed Caligula. And as you can imagine, he wasn't too enamored with that. So, being ruthless and sadistic as he was, he ordered the capture of all those who'd led the jeers, and they then had their tongues cut out, and then was subsequently thrown into the arena. He also bankrupted the empire with lavish parties, while Rome's people starved. Paranoid and savage, he regularly had friends and family executed. Just on a whim. For what? Who knows? Perhaps they'd forgotten his birthday, or perhaps hadn't commented on how wonderful he looked in his latest high-fashion toga. Whatever, a mere 4 years after ascending to power, even his own bodyguards had had enough of his antics. And in 41 AD, they assassinated him in a hallway, finally ending his perverted, bloodthirsty reign. Mind you, I would assume the animals in the arena missed him. Domitian, Roman Emperor for 15 long years. Oh, by the way, that is quite a long time for a Roman emperor to be in power. Ruled with an iron fist, and a paranoia that made him one of the most feared men in Roman history. He started strong, repairing the economy, reforming the military, and bringing order to the empire. But of course, as is the case with most Roman emperors, it doesn't take too long for the darker side of their characters to come to the fore. Domitian believed in absolute power. He was not afraid to get his hands dirty either. He liked to see prisoners in private, hold their chains in his hands, and shove a flaming torch under their private parts before personally castrating them. He was a bit of a show-off at public events as well, and liked to force slaves to stand a fair way away from him, with their fingers spread out on a wooden board. Always game for a laugh, he would then shoot arrows between the terrified slaves' fingers. Of course, not really being much of a sharpshooter, this often resulted in some ham-fisted outcomes. Senators lived in constant fear as he purged the elite class with brutal efficiency, and his spies were everywhere. Accusations of treason, real or fabricated, led to bloody trials and public humiliations. Even his own family didn't feel safe. By the end of his reign, Rome was drowning in fear, and his assassination in the year 96 was met with a huge collective sigh of relief. Whew. He wasn't just a Roman emperor, he was a force of nature. Having humble beginnings, he clawed his way up through a brutal and powerful empire, right to the very top. And when he got there, he changed the game. He split the Roman Empire in two and ruled with an iron fist. But let's talk savage, because it was this guy who launched the Great Persecution, the bloodiest crackdown on Christians the empire had ever seen. Churches were burned, scriptures destroyed, and believers tortured or killed. One victim of the emperor's newfound ferocity towards the religion was actually very close to home. Diocletian's butler, Peter, who by all accounts was a very good butler. But the emperor had a problem with him. He was a Christian and didn't care much for the rituals of the Roman gods. And of course this was not to be accepted. Peter was subsequently brought before the public and whipped so viciously that his skin was shredded to the bone. Next, salt and vinegar were poured into Peter's wounds. Oh. And then a large barbecue was brought out. And bit by bit, tiny morsels of flesh were removed from Peter's mangled body and cooked in front of him until he died. Diocletian continued his rule until 305 AD, when, in a shocking twist, he became the first Roman emperor to voluntarily step down from power. So, while the empire was still reeling from his brutal legacy, Diocletian retired to his palace, where, presumably, he spent the rest of his days tending to his garden. And when the weather was nice, I don't know, maybe he fired up the odd barbecue? If you've enjoyed this 5 and you've got ideas for a new one, then pop your suggestions in the comments below and we'll see what we can do. Thanks for watching.